This conference will now be recorded.
In yesterday's session, we were discussing about what is Docker Swarm, how to deploy applications in Docker Swarm. Basically, in Docker Swarm, we have to create a services. So there are two different types of services, or there are two service modes. What are those? We discussed yesterday. The service modes in a Docker Swarm, we have a replica mode and global mode. We can scale up, scale down the services which are created in a replica mode, and we can't scale up, scale down the services which are created in a global mode. Now, we have a Docker Swarm machine, master. Whatever you want to do, whatever tasks you want to do in this cluster, Docker Swarm cluster, we have to request a master. So as of now, we have these many nodes in the cluster, one master, and rest of them are workers, right? So here, the master machine got initialized using Docker Swarm init. We have executed one command called Docker Swarm init that has initialized the master. And how to join the workers to this cluster, we discussed last class. How to join the workers to this cluster. If I execute Docker Swarm init, it will initialize the swarm, it will initialize the master. That machine become a master swarm. So how to join workers, right? How to join workers to this cluster, that group, basically that swarm. The master machine will give a token. It will give two types of token. One is worker token, another one is master token. So if you want to join worker, you get the worker token, and execute that token in the machine which you want to add to this cluster. So that will be joined to this cluster as a worker. If you join with master manager token, that node will be joined as a manager. So we have created a cluster, Docker Swarm cluster, and we deployed services in this cluster. As of now, how many services are there in this cluster? 3 services, 2 replica type services, one is global service. Now, if you understand, right, by default, does containers are coming in master? If you see, does containers are getting created in the master also for these services? We have a containers created in the master also for these services. Let's say if I don't want containers to be created in the master, master has to schedule the containers only in the workers. I don't want containers to be coming in the master or any node, not only master. I don't want containers to be scheduled in some node. For this case, let's say master. I don't want the containers to be scheduled in the master. So what can we do, right? I don't want containers to be coming in the master. I want master to be only manage the containers, but containers should not be created in the master. I want master to only manage the containers and nodes in the cluster, but I don't want containers to be created in the master for Docker Swarm services. If you see, now do we have some containers running in the master? When I execute Docker node ps, that node name, you can see the containers which are running in that node, which is created by Swarm. Do we have some containers running in the master? How many containers are running in the master? If you see, as of now, there are 4, I think 3 to 4 containers are running in the master. Now, I don't want containers to run in the master. I want master to just manage the containers and the nodes which is running in that nodes. If you see, by default, do you see master is active, availability active? What is the meaning of active? It is, there are 2 things, status and active. Status is ready. Ready in the sense the Docker is working fine in that node. There is no issues with the Docker. That server is good. The Docker is good in that server. Availability active. What does it mean? It is available to schedule the containers, have the containers. So if I don't want containers to be scheduled in some node, there is a concept called a drain. We can drain the nodes. We can drain the nodes. I can drain any node. I can drain any node, not only master node. I can drain any node. So if I drain this node, that node will be part of cluster, but containers will not be scheduled in that node. What will happen to the containers which is already running in that node? If I drain this node now, what will happen to the containers which is already running in that node? Now there are a lot of containers which are running in this node. If I drain this node, what will happen? It will move to another node, right? It will move to other nodes, maybe this one or this one. But if I drain this node, I have a lot of services in this cluster. These 2 servers doesn't have much capacity. If I drain this node, the swarm will try to move the containers to other node, but because of very less resources available in these nodes, does the containers will be able to run in that node? Does those machines will work as expected, or the machine, the process, the Docker process may go down? Now these many containers, 6 containers, has to be accommodated in these 2 workers. Now will it able to accommodate because of very less resources available? Will the cluster will be impacted? The cluster will be impacted because it cannot accommodate this much containers because of very less resources available. So let me do one thing. Let me delete few services. Docker service ls. Let me remove few services. Maybe let me remove this service also. Service, there is a typo. Now I have very less services. Now let's see Docker service ps. Now if you see, these replicas are running in this node only, master node. Now if I drain this node now, what will happen to the replicas, these service replicas? As of now I have only one service. These service replicas are running in master only now. If I drain the master, what will happen? Now if I drain the master, what will happen now? What will happen to the containers which is running in the master? Now I have only one service in the cluster. There are 2 replicas. Both the replicas are running in the master only now. If I drain this master, what will happen to the replicas of this service which is running in this master now? Will it be shifted to other node? So it will be shifted to other node. Now I don't have lot of applications in the cluster. I don't have lot of applications in the cluster, lot of services. Will these two nodes will be able to accommodate these containers? No. Will these nodes will be able to accommodate the containers which is running in the master if they shifted? Yes. Now, how to drain the node? So there is a command like this: docker node update --- availability drain. So --- docker node update - availability drain. Which node you want to drain? This node. So as of now, is it active to take the container? If you see here, as of now, it is active to take the container. I'm draining that node. So which means the availability will be marked as drain. So containers will not be scheduled to this node, whatever node we have drained. Whatever containers which is already running in that node will be shifted to other node. But does it perform its activity? Will it take care of the managing the nodes and containers? Even though I drain this node, master node, it will be part of the cluster. It will perform its activity, but containers will not be scheduled on that node. Now, let me drain. Now, if you see, can I see that availability as drain now? I have drained this node. I have drained the node. Master is still part of the cluster. It is going to do its functionality. We can still create a services. The master will manage the nodes and containers, right? But the containers will not be come in the master because of the we drain the master. Now, if you see, as of now, why these two earlier? This one was running in the master. This one was running in the master. Why it has stopped 36 seconds ago? These two, because we have drained the master. Now where the services are running now for that service? Still we have a two replicas for this service. If you see, now do you see it is shifted to 96 and 159. If you see, it is shifted from 103 to 159, 103 to 96, which means since we have drained the node, whatever parts, whatever containers which is running in that node, it has shifted to other nodes. Now, still I can create a service. The containers will be managed by the swarm. But since I have drained the master, now whatever services I am creating, the replicas of that service, will it get created in the master? I mean to say, does containers will be coming in the master? No. If you see, I am creating a service. Any type of service, whether it's a global mode, whether it's a replica mode, since I have drained the master, the the containers for these services will not come in the master, whether it's a global mode, whether it's a replica mode, that doesn't matter. Now, containers will not come in the master. Now I'm creating a service in global mode. I'm creating a service in global mode. Now if you see, I have two services, but total I have three nodes. Why only two replicas? for a global service? Why only 2 replicas even though I have a 3 nodes? Why it has only 2 containers for a global service? If you see Docker service PS, this global service, is it running in the master? Is it running in the master? Do we have a replica of global service in the master? No. Why? Because we have drained the master. We have drained the master. So now let's say I want to, sometimes in the interview they are going to ask this question. Let's say I want to do some OS patches. I want to do some kind of upgrades, or I want to do some kind of a maintenance activity in my cluster. Maintenance activity in the sense, maybe I want to update some software versions in this machine, or I want to update some packages in this machine, and I don't want to impact the applications which is running in the cluster. I want to do some kind of a maintenance activity. Sometimes in the interview you may get these kind of questions. Without impacting the applications which is running in your cluster, how do you perform the maintenance activity? I want to do some OS patches, OS upgrades, some security patches. So can I use this concept? Can I drain this node first? Can I drain this node? Suppose I want to perform some activity, maintenance activity in this node. Can I drain this node first? If I drain this node, what will happen to the containers which is running in that node? Will it be shifted to other nodes? If you have enough CPU, enough memory, enough nodes in the cluster, whatever containers, whatever applications which is running in this node, will it be shifted to other node if I drain this node? Very important. Interview also they'll ask maintenance, right? It will be shifted to other node. Then can I SSH to this machine? Can I install? Can I update whatever I want to do, whatever softwares I want to update, whatever packages I want to install? Can I do that once I drain this node? Then once that maintenance activity is done, can I make this active again? The way I have drained, I can make it active again. Then can I go to other node to do the maintenance activity? I will do the maintenance activity. I will again make this node active. Then I will take another node. I can drain that node and do the activity. This way, can we do the maintenance activities like upgrading some softwares, packages without impacting the applications? One node after the other, right? We can do that. So, but do we need to have enough CPU, enough memory, enough nodes in the cluster? Without having lot of CPU, lot of memory, or lot of nodes, if I drain these nodes, if the other nodes are not able to accommodate the containers, does your applications will be impacted? Does your cluster will be impacted if you don't have enough nodes, enough CPU memory? And if you are draining, it will be impacted. This is way I can drain. The way I have drained, can I make it active again? The way I have drained now, is it possible for me to make this active again, this node? I can say something like this. The way I have drained, I can make active. The moment I make this node active, what will happen to the global service? Global service, will it be still 2 by 2 if I make this active, or it will become 3 by 3? It becomes 3 by 3. Now, again my node, this is active. Now, do you see? The moment the node become active, do you see the pod is running in that? Container is running in that. So we can drain the nodes, not only master node, worker node. Also we can drain. This is concept of drain. Now, sometimes in the interview, they are going to ask this type of question also. I want the containers of services to be scheduled in a specific machine in the cluster. Let's say I have a Docker Swarm cluster. I have a lot of nodes. Now I have a master. Let's say I have a worker 1. Let's say worker. To deploy the containers, I mean to say to deploy the applications in the cluster, whom we are, with whom we are talking? We are interacting with who? Master. So I am asking to create a service. I am asking like this, replicas to some image name, something like this. Something like this we are requesting. Now, who is deciding? Like we are requesting Swarm, something like this. Now request goes to master. What this master is doing is master is allocating, I mean to say is master is assigning containers to the cluster. I mean to say the nodes are maybe in the master itself. Thus these containers are coming up. Now the master is taking care of that scheduling activity. The master is scheduling the containers for these services. By default, based on what it will assign the containers to the nodes. By default, what it will do? By default, based on the resources, based on the containers which is already running in those nodes, based on that it will assign. Now, my requirement is I want to control how containers should be scheduled in this cluster. Let's say, even though master is active, I don't want containers to be coming in the master for that service. Even though master is active, let's say, I don't want containers to be coming in the master while creating a service. How can we control? We have a concept called container placement or scheduling. Container placement or scheduling using labels and constraints. Labels and constraints. While creating a service, I can use constraint. Constraint in the sense condition. I can use constraint. Constraint in the sense condition. Something like this. If you see, let me inspect this node. The master node I am inspecting. If you see, what is the role? If you see, there is a role. As of now, there is no labels. I'll come to that. What is the role of this node? Here, if you see, what is the role of that node? The role of this node is manager. So if I inspect this node, I can use this name or this ID, Docker node inspect or Docker inspect. Now, if you see, as of now, we have not added any labels, but what is the role of this node? If you see, what is the role of this node? Worker. Now, let's say, even though master is active, if I use this condition while creating a service like a constraint, something like this. hyphen constraint node dot role double equals to worker. So while creating a service, I am using condition like this, hyphen constraint node dot role double equals to worker. So we are requesting master to create a service, and I am using this condition constraint. So the containers for this service, will it be created in the master even though master is active? Because of this condition, does containers will be come in the master even though master is active? Because of this condition, wherever this condition is satisfied, there only containers will be created. So this way, even though master is active, does the replicas of this service will be scheduled in the master, or only it will be scheduled here wherever the condition is satisfied? So master will allocate, or master will assign a containers for that service wherever the condition is satisfied. So the swarm, it will allocate the containers, it will schedule the containers wherever the condition is satisfied. So it will allocate containers only wherever the condition is satisfied. If something goes wrong with this container, does master will recreate the containers again wherever this condition is satisfied? If something goes wrong with that container, again it will recreate wherever that condition is satisfied. Now, if something goes wrong with this node completely, does this container for this service, does this container will come in the master? If this node itself goes down, will it come in the master? No, because condition is not satisfied. It will maybe go in this machine. So this way, can I control the container scheduling, container placement in my Docker Swarm? How my containers to be scheduled, where it has to be scheduled using these conditions, constraints. Now let me show that. Let me delete whatever services I have, because if I keep creating a services, the cluster may not work. If I keep creating a services, the cluster may not work. To demonstrate, now if you see, my master machine is also active. Now I don't have any services. Now I don't want the containers for the service should be created in the master. Whether it's a global mode, whether it's a replica mode, that doesn't matter. Now, whether it's a global mode, whether it's a replica mode, now if I use this condition, whether it's a global mode or replica mode, that doesn't matter. Let's say I'm creating in a replica mode only. I'm creating 3 replicas. If I don't use any condition, does containers may come in this machine also? If I don't use any condition, now does containers can come in this machine? Yes. Now I'm using some condition, something like this, hyphen constraint. What is my constraint? Node dot role double equals to worker. Now, does this condition will be satisfied on this node? Does containers will be scheduled in this node now because of this condition? No. So this way, does the replicas of this service, will it be created only in these nodes? Let's see that. Now, if you see, I created a service. In which mode I created a service? Replica mode. 3 replicas are there. If you see, do you see the containers, the replicas of that service, is it created in this node even though this is active? No. Why that has not been done? Why the Swami is not scheduled the container in that node even though that is active? Because of the condition, because of this constraint. Now, if I create a service in global mode also with this condition, because if I create a global service with this condition also, again, does the container will be created in that master node even though master is active for the global service? If I create a service with this condition? No. If I create a global service without this condition, then if I create a global service without this condition, then will it be scheduled in this node? Since it is active, it will create, right? This is one thing. Now let's say I want containers to be created in a specific node. I have some nodes like this. Let's say I have some nodes like this. Now I want container to be created in a specific node. How can I do that? Will I able to use this condition based on the role? Now I want container to be created exactly in this node or this node, but not in this node. It has to be created in this node or these two nodes, but not this node. But in that type of situation, will I able to use condition on this role? Are you getting my point? In the interview also you'll get these kind of questions, right? I want containers to be created in a specific node or group of node. How can you do that? Now, specific node, I mean to say, I want containers to become in this node exactly, or this node, or it can be these two group of nodes, but it should not be scheduled in this node. Can I use this condition based on the role for that use case? Can I use condition on role? If I use based on the condition on this role, this is satisfied in all the nodes. Thus containers may come in this node also. We cannot use condition on this node role because I want container to be created exactly in this node or these two nodes, but not this node. Can I use? Because if I use this one, is it satisfied in all these nodes? The condition is satisfied in all these nodes. If I use this one, it will be satisfied in all the nodes. So there is a chance that container may come here. I don't want containers to come in this node. I want container to come in this node exactly, specific node. Then how can I do that? By using a labels concept. By using a labels concept. Can I add labels for these nodes? Whatever label I want to add, labels for the nodes. Labels. What is label? Labels to the nodes actually. What is labels? Labels are key value pair. Any key, any value you can add. As of now, do we have any labels? We already verified. Do we have any labels for any node? If you see, do we have any label for this node? Do we have any label? No. For this node, do we have any label? Do we have any label? No. So can I add whatever labels I wanted to add? Let's say, I'll tell you the reason. Let's say you may have this node with a different hardware. This machine hardware is different. You have like very high CPU, or I want some applications to be scheduled in the special machines where I have a lot of CPU, lot of maybe like different hardware. Let's say this has a different SSD. It has a different SSD. It will give better read and write operations in this node. So I want my container to be scheduled in this machine if is expecting a different hardware. So can I add a labels? Whatever labels I want to add, like labels, key and value. I can say any key, any value, something like this. Something like this. I can add any key, any value. Let's say storage type SSD. Let's say this worker machine, this machine is having a different hardware. I can add a label like this, storage type SSD. Then if I use that condition here, instead of node.role, let's say instead of node.role, let's say instead of node.role here, node.labels dot the key, label key, storage type. I'm just giving an example. Storage type double equals to whatever value you have given there for that. Now, if I create a service like this condition, so these containers, will it be created in this node or this node or this node? No. If I add a label like this to the node and I am using that label in a constraint, as a constraint like this. Now in this case, will the containers will be created in this node, or this node? Will it be created in this node, this node, this node? If this is my constraint, no. So will it be scheduled in this node because we added a label like this? We are using that label as a condition. So does the containers will be scheduled in this node wherever that label is satisfied? Yes. Suppose, let's say I added another node also. Another node also has a label, same label. In that case, will it be scheduled in these two nodes, group of nodes? Let's say same label has been added to other node also. Does the containers will be scheduled in group of nodes, these two? Yes. But will it be scheduled in this node? No. So you will have these kind of requirements also in real time. You will have these kind of requirements also in real time. I want service, I mean to say containers to be scheduled in the specific nodes or group of nodes. So what concept we can use in simple one line answer? What concept we can use in Docker Swarm? I want the pods, I mean to say containers to be scheduled in a specific node or group of nodes. The answer is labels and constraints. So labels, we will add a labels to what? We can add labels to what? Labels to the nodes. Those labels can be used. Those labels can be used as a constraints, while creating a services. We can label the nodes. Those labels can be used as constraints while creating a services. So what is the answer? How can we control the containers to be scheduled in the specific nodes or group of nodes in Docker Swarm? We can use a concept of labels and constraints. Now let me demonstrate. Now let's say I have these nodes. We don't have any labels. Let's see if I can see the labels. So let's say so there is no, let's inspect. We don't have any labels. Can I add a label now to these nodes, whatever I wanted to add, right? Docker node, again, update. What node? Let's say this node, hyphen label hyphen add or add hyphen label. I don't remember exactly. Let me try. Hyphen label hyphen add any key, any value. Let's say I can give something like this. Name equals to something like this. Node 1. Any key, any value. We can add a multiple labels also. I'm adding something like this. Name node 1. I think this is correct only. Hyphen label hyphen add. Now, if I inspect that node, can I see that label, whatever has been added now? Do you see that label? Now, whatever we have added, we added something like this. Node name node 1. Now, can I use this label as a constraint while creating a service? Instead of condition on the role, can I use a condition on the label now? If I want containers to be scheduled exactly in this node, we can do that. Let me show you. Maybe let me create service hyphen name, something like this. Docker service create. Hyphen replicas. Even though I am creating two replicas, now for this image, if I am not using condition, will it be distributed to all the active nodes? Will it be distributed to all the active nodes? Yes. Now let me use this condition. Hyphen constraint. Now constraint is node dot labels dot label key. What is the label key? What is the label key? Now, what is the label key? Now, name double equals to value. What is the value? Whatever I have given, node 1. This is the value. Now let's say if I give something like this, if this is not satisfied on any node, now does the containers for this service will be created? If none of the node has this label, will it be created? Does containers will be coming scheduled in any node if the condition is not satisfied on the any node? No. So make sure you are giving a correct label. So this condition, is it going to be satisfied on all the nodes as of now, or only in one node? This condition only on one node. Now I am creating two replicas. So since it is satisfied in only one node, does both replicas will be created in the same node? Both the containers will be created in the same node where it is matching the condition? Yes. Suppose same label is part of other node also. Other node also has a label, same label. In that case, does containers will be distributed between those two nodes wherever that node has these labels? Yes, right? That is how it works. Now, I'm creating a service with this condition. If you see, Two replicas are there. Docker service PS, that service name. Why both are running, both the replicas are running in same node 159? Because of this condition, because of the condition, that constraint. Now if I scale up, scale down, if I scale this replica service, will it be scaled in the same node, this node only? Unless until you have other nodes with same label, it will not, right? So if I scale also, the scale up, scale down also will happen in the same node. Now third replica also, is it coming in the same node? If you see, so this is how we can use the labels and constraints. Are you guys clear what is drain, what is labels and constraints? These type of questions you will get in the interview. We are going to use all these concepts in real time. So if I want to do some kind of a maintenance activity, upgrading something in that nodes in the cluster, I want to perform some maintenance activity. What concept I can use without impacting the applications which is running in that cluster? I want to upgrade something in those nodes. I can use a drain, but is it recommended to drain all the nodes once and perform the activity, or one by one? You drain one node, then do the activity, then make it active again, one by one. So this is a, you can do that if you want to do that. Okay. So this is a, we can use Docker Swarm, right? So yesterday itself, we created a cluster. Nitin, if you didn't attend a day before yesterday class, I have explained how to create a cluster. Kindly go through that recording. Day before yesterday, we created a cluster. How did we created a cluster, guys? Someone can tell me how did we create a cluster? Cluster is a group of servers, group of Docker nodes. We will have something like this, group of Docker nodes. How can I initialize the cluster? In one of the node, in one of the machine, I can execute this command, Docker swarm init. So the moment I execute this one, this node becomes what? The moment I execute this command in this one of the node, this becomes the master. Now I want to join these machines as a masters or workers. Let's say I want to have a multi-master. So how can I do that? I want to join these as a masters to this cluster, these as workers to this cluster. What can I do? It will give two types of token. Docker swarm join -token manager token. If I execute this command, it will give the token manager token. By getting the token, if I execute the token in this machine will be reported to this swarm as what type of node. If I take the manager token and execute here, this node will be reported to this swarm as what type of node? Manager node or worker node? Manager node. Now if I get the worker token and execute, if I get a worker token and execute the token like this, if I get this token and if I execute that command in these nodes, this will be reported to this as what? Workers, right? Like this, let's say for another environment, for QA or prod, I'll create a servers for in a different VPC, different network, because dev environment should be isolated from production environment. Let's say in different VPC, I'll create a servers again like this. What software should be installed in these machines before setting up the cluster, Docker Swarm cluster? What is the only required software in all these machines? Docker. Again, in one of the node, can I do this? Can I do this in one of the node? Will it initialize the cluster? Then again, can I take manager token, worker tokens from that node, from this swarm? Can I execute respective tokens in these machines? So will it become a different cluster from the above? Will it become a different cluster from the above? This is one cluster. This is one cluster. Above one is another cluster. This is one cluster. Above one is another cluster. That's what we discussed in the, I think, day before yesterday class. So there are two types of services: replica service, global service. What type of applications we can deploy in a global service? As I told already, we discussed day before, I think yesterday session. We have a replica service, we have a global service. What type of containers, what type of applications we can deploy as a global service? Suppose kind of a monitoring agents. You want to monitor your servers, like using Prometheus or using some monitoring software like Datadog, AppDynamics, something like that. Do we need some kind of a agent in each and every node? Whatever node you want to monitor, does agent is required in that node? That agent will gather all the data and it will send it to some central server. Do we need agent software, monitoring agent, log agent? So in each and every node we should have those kind of agents. And how can I make sure each and every node in my cluster have those agent softwares? If I have a Docker image for that agent softwares, can I create a service in a global mode out of that image, out of that agent software Docker image? Will it be scheduled in each and every node? It will be created in each and every node for those type of agent softwares. Our own applications, our own microservices, in which mode I can create? So based on the load, I can increase the replicas, I can decrease the replicas. Based on the load, based on the requirement, we can create in a replica mode. Is everyone clear now? What is replica mode? What is global mode? Okay. Now, this is how we can do that in a Docker Swarm. Sometimes in the interview, they may ask how many clusters you have. Docker Swarm. If you are using Docker Swarm, that can be Docker Swarm. Or if you are using Kubernetes, that can be Kubernetes clusters. So how many clusters you have? Ideally, how many clusters we will have? As I already told, per environment, one cluster, one per one environment. Let's say I have a dev environment, I have a QA environment, I have a UAT environment, I have a prod environment. In that case, how many clusters? 4 clusters, right? And again, each cluster, will it have a set of masters and workers? In real time, are you going to go with single master or multi-master? Multi-master, right? So in case of Docker Swarm, can I have a masters in even numbers, like 2 masters, 4 masters, 6 masters, or masters will be in odd numbers? Odd numbers. There is a concept called Docker Swarm quorum. Docker Swarm quorum. So there is a formula for that also, Docker Swarm quorum. So there is a formula. It is going to use one algorithm. It is going to use one algorithm, Raft Conscious algorithm, right? So it will tolerate up to these many failures, n minus 1 by 2. There is a formula. It is going to use this algorithm, Raft Conscious algorithm in Docker Swarm, right? So it tolerates up to these many failures. So which means, what is n here? What is n here? Number of masters. Let's say I have 2 masters. 2 minus 1 by 2. It becomes 1 by 2. It's a 0.5. Will I have a high availability in the master? Will it tolerate any failure if I have 2 nodes? If one node is failed, one master node is failed, does other node becomes master if I have only 2 nodes? It will tolerate like this. If I have only 2 nodes, master nodes, if one node goes down, does other node becomes a master? If you understand this formula correctly, it will tolerate these many failures. It becomes 0.5. Is it going to tolerate any failure out of 2 nodes? If one node goes down, does other node becomes a master? It should be. Is it going to tolerate? If I have only 2 nodes, master nodes, if one node goes down, does other node becomes a master based on this quorum, based on this formula? No. So suppose if I have 3 masters, will it tolerate one master failure even though one master goes down? Does one other two, between other two, does one node become a master? Other two reachable servers, it will become a master. So if I have a 3 masters, how many failures it will tolerate? Which means how many masters can go down, still you have a quorum? Only 1. Now that's why, do we have in odd numbers masters like this? No. So whatever I can achieve with the 3, 4 also same thing. There is no use of having 4 masters. So you see masters in this like this, 3 masters, 5 masters like this. But most of the cases you see masters, number of masters as 3. Sometimes they may ask this question, how many nodes you have in the Docker Swarm cluster? As I already told, in my production, we were having total, this is 3 years back. We were using Docker Swarm 3 years back. We were having total 13 nodes. Out of these 13 nodes, 3 master nodes. We were having 10 worker nodes. You may have a question, sir, why 3 masters? You are sure? Why 3 masters? Why we have a 3 masters? Because to have a high availability in the masters. Why 10 workers? And each machine capacity, as I already told, each machine capacity is 32 core CPU, 256 GB RAM. So why this much capacity? As I already told, that is based on number of services, number of containers you want to create. So how many containers? How many services? These services are nothing but what? Let's say I am trying to deploy one application. That application has 30 microservices. Let's say I have 30 microservices, one application that has 30 microservices. I'm just deploying only this application in that cluster. In that case, how many services? If that application has 30 microservices, how many services? microservices. Each microservice will have its own GitHub repository. Each microservice will have its own application package. That application package, if I am creating as a Docker image, for that Docker image, I need to create a service. If I have one application that has 30 microservices, then how many services? 30 plus some kind of a agent softwares, like log agents, monitoring agent related, right? You can say approximately something like this. Let's say same client, I have two applications. Same client, I have two applications. One application is having 30 microservices, other application is having 15 microservices. Same client, but two different applications of the same client. Both applications I want to deploy. This has 15 microservices. In that case, how many services in that cluster? Same client, two different applications. Something like this. 45. Then how many containers? How many containers? Services is this much. How many containers? Will it be only 45? More. That can be based on the application, right? Based on the microservice. One service may have a 10 replicas, one service may have a 5 replicas based on the load, right? So you should be able to justify this way. You should be able to justify this way. That's why concept is very, very important, not the commands, right? Now, as I already told Sunil, you can have application as a container, database as a virtual machine, or database as a RDS. We already discussed, right? When I am explaining stateful application, stateless application, right? We already discussed. There should be a connectivity between your Docker server and database. If you are running database in a separate virtual machine or RDS, there should be a network connectivity between your database servers as well as your Docker servers. These type of questions definitely will get. Do you have still any doubt? What is service? What is container? What is cluster? Whether I have a 30 microservices, I mean to say 30 services or 50 services, does whatever concept we discussed, is it going to be differ or it will be same? If I have hundreds of services also, how can I create a service? Using Docker service. I can scale up, scale down all these things. Now, let's try to discuss, right? Then, sir, if in general, if you take 45 servers or services, okay, services. So we will have 135. How can you say just 135? You are just calculating 45 into 3. Let's say I have login microservice. I have registration microservice. I have a orders microservice. I have a payments microservice. Add to cart, something like this, just to give an example. Now, do we expect lot of load on login registration than orders and payments? Do you expect lot of load, lot of request comes to login registration orders? I mean to say, expect lot of request comes to these microservices. In that case, I may need to have more replicas for this one, like maybe based on the load. Let's say maybe 8 replicas for this one, 6 replicas for this one. If there is less load, do I need to have 8 replicas or 10 replicas? Can I manage with only less if the requests are very less for these APIs? Something like this. So depends on the traffic. depends on the traffic. Depends on the traffic. This depends on the load on that APIs, load on that application we will have. So how many applications we will work in one time, right? That can be any, n number of applications, Deepak. If you are a shared resource, you can parallelly work on multiple clients also. Since if you are a DevOps engineer, parallelly you may support multiple clients also. Or if it is dedicated for one client, one project, you are going to work for only one client, but that client can have many applications. Just to give an example, let's say, I'm taking this. Does this Flipkart has lot of applications like end user applications, vendor applications, customer care? Customer care will use some internal applications, mobile applications, desktop applications. Again, do we have a lot of apps for same client? Desktop applications, mobile applications, end user, customer care, vendors, who is who is selling the products to Flipkart. Right? Like this, you have a lot of applications. And again, does each application will have a, if it is developed using microservice, will it have, each application will have lot of microservices again? Each application will have a microservices, lot of microservices. So it depends on project to project, client to client. But whatever it is, does this concept changes? Whatever we discuss like containers, clusters, services? No, right? So that is how it works. So what is the roles and responsibilities as a DevOps engineer we do in Docker and Docker Swarm? What is the roles and responsibility of a DevOps engineer in Docker and Docker Swarm? If I have a group of DevOps engineers, right? One guy may, the lead may set up the cluster. If I have a group of DevOps engineer, the lead or who is expert in that, they will set up the cluster. So as a DevOps engineer, what is the roles and responsibilities? Are we responsible for Dockerizing the applications, like creating a Docker files, creating a images? Are we responsible for creating a Docker registries? I mean to say repositories, like it can be ECR repository, it can be Nexus repository, it can be a Jenkins, it can be JFrog repository. So responsible for Dockerizing the applications, writing Docker files, Docker compose files, setting up the clusters, maintaining the clusters, and deploying the applications into that clusters using Jenkins, right? All those type of activities, right? So as a DevOps engineer, we are responsible for creating a Docker files, creating a compose files, setting up the clusters, managing the clusters, deploying applications to the cluster using Jenkins pipelines, all those stuff, right? So each replica should be in a different availability zone. That depends on how you created a node, sir. Suppose all your Docker servers are running in the same availability zone. Docker will just create a containers in the nodes. Docker doesn't know where is that node, whether it is in a same availability zone, different availability zone. It doesn't know. That is based on how you have set up the cluster. Sometimes in same node you will have a multiple containers. Now let's say I'm trying to create 10 replicas for one service. 10 replicas for one service. If I have only 6 nodes in the cluster, does some nodes will have a 2 replicas for this service? If I have only 6 nodes, does some nodes will have a 2 replicas, 2 containers? Yes, right? Now Deepak is asking one question. In the interview, we can say that we have 4 clusters for 4 environments, 1 for app. It is basically one for, instead of app, I can say 1 client. Let's say same client, there are multiple applications. Do we really need multiple clusters? Can't I deploy multiple apps in the same cluster for that client? Do we really need another cluster for another application for the same client? As I told, let's take, I have a desktop apps, web applications. I have a mobile app for the same client. Can't I deploy desktop application as well as mobile applications in the same cluster? Do I really need another cluster, separate cluster for this one, separate cluster for this one? Do I really need? Not required, right? Instead of one app, I can say for that client, for that client, right? That is how it works. Now, let's try to understand one more concept. There is one more concept called a Docker stack. What is Docker stack and what is Docker service? What is service, guys? What is service? We already created service. Service is already not, it's a group of one or more containers. I can say it's a collection of one or more containers of same type, which means same image or application. Now, what is stack? Let's take this example. Now I want to deploy this application. This application has 2 images to be deployed. Let's say I have this application. Let's say I have to deploy 2 images. In that case, how many services I need to create? How many services I need to create? Let's take this application, which we already deployed. There are 2 images. In that case, if I want to deploy this in a Docker Swarm, how many services needs to be created? 2 services. Now, is there any way I will be able to create multiple services in a Docker Swarm at the same time? Are you getting my point? I don't want to execute Docker service create 2 times. I don't want to create Docker service commands 2 times. Is there any way we can deploy multiple services together? Yes, that we call it as a stack, Docker stack. Prashant, understand the concept of service and replica. Replica is different. Can I have more replicas of a single service? Service is different, replica is different. Replica is containers. Service is two different applications, two different images. So we can create a stack in a Docker Swarm. What is stack? It's a collection of services. It's a collection of services. It's a group of services or collection of services. So how can we create a stack? Using compose file. Using compose file, we can create a Docker stack. But what command? Can I use this command? Docker compose up -d, something like this. Can I use this command to create a services in a cluster? No. This is a standalone mode. This is a standalone mode. Now, instead of this one, I can use this command, Docker stack deploy -compose file. Even though it's a default name, you need to use this option, -compose file, your stack name. Suppose this compose file contains two services, then that stack will have how many services? I'm creating a stack using this compose file. Let's say this compose has two services. This has two services. That service will have, that stack will have how many services? If this compose file has two services, it will have two services, this stack. As of now, do I have any stack? Do I have any stack created in this cluster? We don't have any stack. Now let's take this compose file now. Now using this compose file, if I create a stack, then how many services will be there? How many services will be created for that stack? Now if you see, how many services we have? Two services. Now will this instructions will be considered when I deploy this as a stack? Will these instructions will be considered? This one, will these instructions will be considered now? If I deploy in a stack Docker Swarm, if I apply like this, now for this service, how many replicas will be created because of this line? How many replicas will be created for this service? Which means this service will be created in which mode? Since I mentioned this one, replica mode, two replicas. If I don't define this one, by default, which mode, how many replicas? If you see, for this one, I have not defined that instructions, deploy instructions. So which mode this service will be created and how many replicas? The default one. What is the default mode? The default mode is replica mode. It will create one replica. Now, can I use all these constraints concept in the compose file also? Will I able to mention constraint? Suppose this service should be created in Swarm. We can use all those options here also. We can use all those options. Suppose if I want to have some services in a global mode, if I want to have some services in a global mode, I can say mode global. I can say mode global. So So suppose let's say I want this to be created in a global mode. I can say mode global, something like this. So in this case, this will be created in which service mode? Global mode. Instead of global mode, I can say something like this, hyphen, this one, replicas, like this. In which mode it will be created and how many replicas will be created? Replica mode. Like this, you can give a constraints. You can give a constraints also, something like this. So you can use constraints also. You can refer this official document. Like we can use constraints, all those things, mode, all those things here. Something like this. Deploy replicas 1. Similarly, we can use constraints. Depends on. Now if you see like this placement, container placement. Now if I say this one placement max replicas per node is 1, which means maximum only one replica will be created in each node. Similarly, we can use mode like this, mode global, like this, placement constraints. Now if I do this way, suppose here placement constraint node dot role double equals to worker. Now even though master is active, now will the containers, will the replicas will be created in the master for this service? Something like this. I can use constraints, all those stuff. Now if I use this way, will it be equivalent to the Docker service command hyphen constraint? This one. Yes. So this way you can use all the options. Now let me tell you few more things. I have a compose file like this. I have a compose file like this. Now by looking at this, what do you understand? What is this? Which means how many replicas will be created for that service? 2. So what is this information? There is a concept called rolling updates, rolling deployments in Docker. What is the meaning of rolling updates or rolling deployments? Can I able to do the zero downtime deployments in a Docker Swarm? Zero downtime deployments. Zero downtime deployment. What is the meaning of zero downtime deployments? Let's say this image is running. Now let's say there is a change in the application. We generated a different image. Now I want to deploy that image. At the same time, I don't want the application to be down. Initially, I deployed with this tag, this image. There is a change in the code. I have another image. The latest code, the latest image has to be deployed. Without bringing that application completely down, will I able to do the zero downtime deployments in Docker Swarm? Like this, right? Now, update config, parallelism 1, delay 20 seconds. What does it mean? When I am updating this service, with a different image, is it going to remove both replicas at the same time? Will it be removed both replicas at the same time? Let's say I have 2 replicas. I am updating the service using this compose file. I am trying to deploy a different version of the image. Now Because of this information, update config parallelism 1, which means does both the replicas of old image will be deleted at the same time and the latest image, latest containers will be created? No. So one by one, it is going to first remove one of the old container, then it will create a new container. While doing the deployments, if it is doing one after the other, still my application is available. If it is going to do one after the other, it is going to remove one container first. Still we have a one more container. Then this delay. What is this delay? 20 seconds. Because it is going to delete one old container, it is going to create one new container. Does the new container will be up and running immediately? Does your application, does your container will take some time to fully function? If I immediately go for another container, again you will have an issue. So I can wait, I can delay the update for 20 seconds, next update, which means after 20 seconds, is it going to delete another replica, another old replica? By that time, that new replica will be up and running. So using these options, all those options, will I able to do the rolling updates, zero downtime deployments? Yes. Instead of manually doing, if you want to automate this one, can you do this using pipeline? You can have a pipeline. In the pipeline, you can create an image, you can push the image, and you can deploy that image using this compose file. If you have a pipeline, you can do that using pipeline. Now, what is this restart policies? What is this restart policy? Let's say there is really a problem in this image. Your container process is not at all coming up. There is an issue in the code itself. The container process is not at all coming up. If I don't have these options, does Docker Swarm will leave that alone? Like it will leave it as is, or it will keep on trying to make sure that container will be up and running? If I don't have this option, if the container is not coming up, it will again try. If the container is not coming up, again it will try. It will go in an infinite loop. If there is a really problem in the code, in the image, if the container is not at all coming up, it will go in an infinite loop. If there is really a problem, I should not go into an infinite loop. So maximum how many times it will try to start, restart. If it is not at all coming up, if the container is failed to come up, maximum how many times it will try to start the container? 5 attempts. After 5 attempts, even though after 5 attempts, if the container is not coming up, it will stop. If I don't have this option, it will go into an infinite loop. Is there any use if there is really a problem if the container is not coming up? There is no use of going into an infinite loop, right? So we can use these options. Now let me deploy this using compose file. But let me, okay, that is fine. Let me delete few services, otherwise let me delete few services. Maybe let me delete this. Now this is my compose file, let's say. This is my compose file. Now what type of network to be created, guys? Now let's say I'm saying volume. Let's say volume will be created by Docker itself. Now I'm saying network as external. What type of network has to be created? I'm saying network as external. What type of network should be created now? Since I want to deploy in a Swarm, will it be a bridge network or will it be a overlay network? I need to have overlay. If I don't mention this one also, if I deploy using stack, what type of network will be created by Docker now? Overlay. If I say external, if I say external, do I need to have a network with this name? If I don't have a network with this name, does Docker will create a network because of this one? No. Now, how to deploy? Do I need to use this command? Docker compose up. Can I use this command? If I use this command, will it be deployed in a swarm mode or standalone mode? Standalone mode. Now I want to deploy in a swarm. So what needs to be created? Docker stack deploy ---- compose file, that file name, whatever file. So YML stack name, you can give something like this. Now since I have defined YAML, okay, it is not YML, I have it a YAML. Now why it is not creating? What it is trying to say? This network is declared as external but could not be found, because I have declared that as an external. In that case, do I need to have that network created? But which driver? Using which driver? Overlay. Now I'm deploying that stack. Now do you see, is it creating a service? How many services it has created? When I'm deploying that stack using compose file, how many services it has created? 2. So how many stacks I have now? How many stacks I have? 2. So this stack has how many services? This stack has how many services? Docker stack services, that stack name. Docker stack services, that stack name. How many services that stack has? 2. Now how many total services I have? How many total services I have? When I see Docker service ls, 3. Now using Docker stack, will I able to create multiple services? Yes. Now let's try to access that application which is deployed, that Spring Boot application. So I have published on port 8080. Now this is talking to the database. This is talking to the database and inserting the data, right? Now let's say there is a change in my application. There is a change in my application. I mean to say I have a different image. I have a different image, latest code. Now since we have a defined that parallel update config parallel deployments. Now this is the image as of now. Let's say there is a change in the code. I want to deploy this version of the image. Let's say different version 1. Now since because of that parallel deployments, when I update that compose file with this image, I have this image already in the registry. Now when I am updating the deployment, I mean to say when I am updating this service, I have changed this. I've changed this. Again, I am executing same command, docker stack deploy, same command. Now, if you see line number 5, there is an issue. Indentation is not correct. Because of this one, rolling updates. Now I'm updating the service. Even though I'm making the deployment, if you see, is my application is down? Is my application is down? But in the background, it has done one after the other. Now, is your service is updated with this image? I mean to say, does containers are running with a different image? But during this time, is there any downtime? Did you observe any downtime when we are updating our applications, when we are doing the deployments? Did you observe any downtime? No. This way, can I do the rolling updates? Will I able to achieve all these features in a normal virtualized deployments, whatever we have done using containerized deployment? Will I able to achieve all these things in a normal virtualized deployment? No. So that's why containers are widely used nowadays. This is how we can use Docker Swarm. Now let's try to understand one more thing. Image repositories. In real time, are you going to pull and push our own images into the public Docker Hub? Are we going to maintain images in our images in the public Docker Hub, public registries? No. In real time, we are going to use our own registries, private registries. That can be either ECR, either Nexus, all those stuff. Now, let me demonstrate using ECR. Nitin, we discussed, what are the best practices to be followed when we are creating images, right? In the perspective of security, while writing a Docker file itself, we told. Is it recommended to have unnecessary packages in the Docker image? No, because it will have a more attack surface, right? Is it recommended to run Docker images as a root user, container root user? No. So it will impact the attack surface if you don't follow those practices at a container level, right? Now let's use this, whatever I was talking, like I want to push images to the private registries. Can I create if I am using AWS, can I go for a managed registry, Docker registry? So what is the service we have in AWS? We have one service called ECR. What is ECR stands for? ECR stands for Elastic Container Registry. Elastic Container Registry, fully managed Docker registry. So it's fully managed by AWS. I can just create registry and I can use. So ECR, click on this Elastic Container Registry. As of now, I don't have any registries. Right? So I'm creating, in ECR, I'm creating a repository now. And again, there are two options, public and private. If I select this and if I create a repository, will it become a public repository? Does anyone can pull the images from public repository? Even though it's a ECR, if I select this one, if I push the images here, does anyone can pull images? Yes. I want to create a private registry. I want to create a private repository. Let me give some name, something like this. Now, I created a repository. So this is what? This is repository name, this is URI. Now, how can I push the images to this repository from Jenkins server or some build server you want to push the images? How can I push? take this URI, this URI. While creating an image, can I tag something like this? Docker build -t. What is this? It has two things. What is this and what is this? This is ECR URL, the registry URL, the registry URL. What is this? The second one? The first one is a registry URL. What is this? This is the repo name. Now, while creating an image, can I tag something like this? :1. What is this after this colon? If I give something like this, what is this? This is what? Tag. I can build something like this. Then if I want to push, what command I can execute after building the image like this? Then can I use Docker push? Push. It will push the image to which one now? Is it going to push the image to Docker Hub? Or is it going to push the image to this ECR? ECR. Now let me build. Let me build. Let me build. Without login, you cannot push. We need to log in. Now this is my build server. Let's say this is my build server or Jenkins server where I am creating an image. Let me connect to that server, build server. So let me connect to that server. Let's say this is my build server. So I have this project. Maybe where is that? This project. Let me go inside that project. Let me build image -t with that URL. ECR, Elastic Container Registry. First, you create a repository. You need to create a repository. The way I have done, this is the repository URL. Then if I don't give any tag, what is the default tag it will use? If I don't use any tag, :latest. Now let me use 1. Now I am creating an image and tagging with ECR. Now do I have an image which is tagged with ECR? This one. Now how to push? How to push? Docker push. But do I able to push this one without authenticating with ECR? What it is trying to say? What it is trying to say? No credentials. Then how to authenticate? How to authenticate with ECR now? Docker login. Docker login. But what is the username? What is the password for ECR? Docker login. It's a Docker login only. So -u username, -p password. But what is the username? What is the password? This is the URL. I need to mention username. I need to mention a password. Authenticate with this URL. What is this URL? Just this much, only this much. The registry, the ECR registry URL. But what is the username? What is the password? Can I use my mail ID, whatever it is? No. So the default username is admin. The default username is admin. Now if you see, let me click on this one. You can understand the push commands here. What is the default username? What is the default username? AWS. This AWS. Okay. Password. But how to get the password? Password is kind of a token. How to get the password? If you understand this command, what are we trying to do? This is how we can authenticate. This is how we can authenticate. What we are trying to do here, what this one is doing, there is a pipe symbol like this. So this first command, what is this first command? Is it a Docker command or it's a AWS command? It's an AWS command. Using this command, what we are trying to do? AWS ECR, what we are trying to do? Are we getting the password of ECR using this command? Are we getting the password of ECR? AWS ECR get login password. Then we are getting that password, pipe symbol. That password, are we passing it as a password std input, std in? Instead of password, it is password std in, which means whatever password we are getting, that is passed as an input for this one. Username is AWS, password we are passing. Then what is this at the last? What is this? It's a registry URL to whom it has to authenticate. That is your ECR URL. But as of now, do I have a AWS CLI installed in this machine? If I just execute like this, is it working? Do we have a AWS CLI installed? No. Now, can I install AWS CLI whatever way I want to install? Whether it is package manager, whether it's a zip file, whatever way. Now I have installed AWS CLI. But if I just install AWS CLI, will it able to get that ECR password unless until that server has a permissions? Will it able to get the ECR password? Unless until that server has a ECR permissions, will it able to get the password? Guys, 5 minutes, I'll close. This is very important also, because in real time we are going to use private registries like ECR. So 5 minutes, we'll close this. Now, here I have a AWS CLI. Now, am I able to get the password? I just have a AWS CLI. Am I getting the password? No. What is required now? Permissions. How can I give the permissions to ECR is one AWS resource. ECR is one AWS resource. How can I give ECR access to this server? Is it recommended to use IAM user concept, or is it recommended to use IAM role concept here? I can use user or role, but what is the best practice? Since this is a AWS server itself, can I use IAM role? Can I create one IAM role? And can I attach ECR permissions to that IAM role? And can I attach that role to this server so that it will have a permissions instead of user, which we already discussed in AWS. Now, let me go to IAM. So, go to IAM, create one role. Suppose I want to push image from my laptop. In that case, what concept I can use as a DevOps engineer or as a developer? I want to push the image to the ECR. In that case, what concept I can use in my laptop? Can I configure my access keys and secret keys? IAM in my laptop. In case of my laptop, I can use user concept, that user should have a access to the ECR. I can use access key and secret key to configure AWS. Since it is already AWS server, can I use role concept? Can I create a role with ECR permissions? So I am creating a role. Use case is EC2 because I want to attach this role with EC2. Permissions. Now, what permissions? I can give permissions to the ECR. Elastic Container let's search with like this. So Amazon EC2 container registry, we have a full access, we have a read-only access. So if I attach read-only policy, EC2 container registry read-only. So if it is a read-only, will it able to push? Suppose I attach this policy and I attach this IAM role to that server, will it able to push the image, or it can only pull the image if I attach read-only? Will it able to push that image from that server? Will I able to push the image from that server wherever I attach this role? No, it can only pull. Now, what I need to select? I need to select full access. EC2 container registry full access. In that case, will I able to push the image also to the ECR from that server? Yes. So let me create one role, ECR full access. ECR full access. Now, can I attach this IAM role to this server, like a Jenkins server, your build server? Can I attach that IAM role to that server, your build server, Jenkins server, from where you want to push this server? Sorry guys, today I am taking some time to show this one. If you have some other meetings, you can drop off and go through the recording. Otherwise, kindly stay back 5 minutes. We will wrap up. So select this one and go to the actions, security, IAM role. Now I am attaching ECR full access. Now, since I have a ECR access, now does this command will be able to get the password now? I am just executing like this. So it's kind of a token. It's kind of a token. It's kind of a token. Now, can I use this one with a Docker login? Docker authentication. Docker login -u AWS -p. You can take this way also. This way also. Then that URL. Otherwise, can I execute both commands together like this using that pipe symbol like this? Can I execute this way so that will it be authenticated? Now authentication is successful. Now can I push the image to the ECR? We have a push permissions also. I mean to say full access. I will be able to push because this server has a full access to the ECR. Now is image is getting pushed to the ECR now. Image is getting pushed to the ECR. Suppose if I am using pipeline, can I have these commands in a pipeline? Can I have, by attaching IAM role, can I have these commands in a pipeline so that it will be authenticated using Jenkins pipelines? I can push, pull. Now, can I see that image in ECR now? ECR registry. Can I see that image pushed to the ECR now? Here, do I see image with tag 1? Now, that image I want to deploy in this cluster now. That image I want to deploy in this cluster, in the Docker Swarm cluster, or Docker machine, or Docker Swarm cluster. Now, do I need to authenticate here? Since it's a private repository, without authenticating, do we able to pull the image? If it is a private repository without authenticating, will I able to pull? Now I have not authenticated in the cluster. Now let me demonstrate. Let me remove all those things, whatever I have deployed. I'm removing the stack. If I remove the stack, both the services will be removed. Now let's say, let me remove this one also. Now I want to deploy that service from private image, whether it's a 2 replicas or 1 replica, that is doesn't matter, right? Now I want to deploy from that image, that private image. So this one, something like this. This is the image. Now, since it's a private repository, if you see, is service is getting created. It is saying no such image, but actually there is an image. This is correct only, but why it is saying no such image? In the background, what is the problem? What is the problem in the background? Since it's a private repository, authentication. If you see, is it saying this error? Image could not be accessed on a registry. So each node should have an access to this registry. So do we need to authenticate with ECR now to create a services out of private images? Now, since it's a cluster, do I need to authenticate with each and every server in the cluster? Or can I authenticate in the master? Somehow, will I able to pass those authentication details to workers? Do I need to execute that Docker login in each and every machine in the cluster? Do I need to authenticate Docker login in each and every machine in the cluster? Not required. You can authenticate with master. That authentication details we can pass to the workers while creating a service. You just need to authenticate with only master. Those authentication details will be passed to the workers when we are creating a service. So we need to have a permissions then. Do I need to have the permissions in all the servers, the TCR permissions in all the servers? I need to have a permissions in all the servers, because images will be pushed in these servers if the container is running. This one. So we need to have a ECR permissions to all the servers. But what type of permissions? Do I really need to give full access, or just read-only access is sufficient for these machines? Least privileges. You have to follow the least privileges principle. In real time, are you going to really push the images from deployment servers? No. In that case, what permissions I can give for these servers? Whatever servers I have selected, full access or read-only is sufficient? Read-only is sufficient. So let me create IAM role again. I can give full access, but that is not recommended. Right? We have to follow least privileges principle. You give whatever is required. Don't give additional access. Now, let me create IAM role. Use case is EC2. Permissions. Then EC2 container registry. This one, read only access. EC2 container registry, read only access. So ECR, read only role. Now let me attach this role to this server. Let me attach to that role to this server. AWS concept here. ECR read only. Now in this server, I can execute same command, this command for authentication. But do I have AWS CLI here? No. Let me install AWS CLI. Now let me authenticate. Let me authenticate. So AWS CLI has been installed. We attach the IAM role. Now authentication is successful. Authentication is successful, right? So then while creating a service, I have to use one option. This service is not able to create because we were trying to use private image. It is not able to create because it is not able to authenticate. Now let me use one option. While creating a service, I can use one option. While creating a service, I can use one option. Hyphen, there is a registry auth. One option is there. Something like this. Hyphen, registry auth. So that authentication details will be passed to the workers if I use that option. If I use that option, something like this. Hyphen with registry auth, something like this option. So hyphen with registry auth. If I use this option, whatever authentication details is authenticated using master, that will be passed to the workers. That will be passed to the workers. That authentication details is passed to the workers. Now let's see if worker is able to pull the image. Let me go to this workers or wherever that service is getting created. Now if you see, the authentication details is passed. There is a service where it is running. Let's see where it is running. So authentication details is already passed. Authentication details is already passed to the workers. So without authenticating in the workers also, are we able to pull the image? Because we pass those authentication details to the workers. Who pass those authentication details? Who pass those authentication details? The master. How come that is passed? How come that is passed? I am using which option to pass while creating a service? This one. So this way, do I need to authenticate in all the servers in the cluster, or I just need to authenticate in the master and pass those authentication details while creating a service or stack? I can use this option. While creating a service or stack, I can use this option. So can I do same thing in the pipeline also? Will I able to execute that Docker login, that command in the master before executing the service create commands? In the pipeline also, can I have that option? First I will authenticate in the master, then I will execute this service command. With this option in the automation also, will I able to do? Yes. But what you have to do manually? Do you need to attach one IAM role to the master nodes, and do you need to install AWS CLI? That has to be done manually, right? Everything can be automated. So this is how we can use, guys, right? There is a video also available in our YouTube channel, how to do the CI/CD to the Docker Swarm using public repository like Docker Hub, or using private repository also you can do that. So here there is a video, Docker Swarm, Jenkins and Docker Swarm, but here I am using Docker Hub Bangalore. Here, instead of Docker Hub, will you able to do using private repository like ECR? Now I have manually explained. Will you able to do same thing in the pipeline? Whatever process I have done. So this is how you can do that. So that's it from my side, guys, from the Docker and Docker Swarm. So tomorrow we are going to start Kubernetes. Tomorrow I'll just start Kubernetes. Okay, what is Kubernetes, how it works, right? Tomorrow we'll continue on Kubernetes. Image vulnerabilities, basically if you are using ECR, you can enable vulnerability in ECR, right? So if there are any vulnerabilities, right, it will report those vulnerabilities. You can enable in the ECR itself. So while creating a ECR, there is an option to enable the vulnerability scanning. Guys, tomorrow no holiday. Try to, because the schedule is not going as expected, right? I can't give holidays on every Saturday. Maybe next Saturday I will give holiday, but not this Saturday. So here, when we are creating ECR, right, there is an option to enable the vulnerability scanning. If there are any vulnerabilities, it will not allow. Here, right, scan. So if I enable this one, so the image will be scanned before it is accepting vulnerability scanning. It comes with this one, ECR. Now, if I am using Docker Swarm, containers, if there is an issue with containers will be automatically started. If I am using normal Docker, if I stop the server and if I start the server, does containers are coming up automatically? Normal Docker. If I am stopping the Docker server and starting the Docker server, whatever containers which is already running, is it coming up automatically? Did you observe anytime? No. So in that case, we can use restart policies. There is a policy called restart. -, restart. I say always. I can use this option while creating a containers. While creating a containers, I can use this option. - restart. There is restart policy. If I say always, if you stop the server and start the server, does Docker will start the container automatically if the container is created with this policy? It will be done. Okay. Even though Docker Swarm is not widely used, I try to cover in and out of Docker Swarm also, because some legacy projects will be there. You might work on legacy projects, some old projects where they're using Docker Swarm, or in the interview they may ask questions on the Docker Swarm. We try to cover Docker Swarm also. Almost 16 days we covered Docker and Docker Swarm. You can understand the importance of Docker and Docker Swarm, right? So Kubernetes will take approximately 20 to 22 days. Kubernetes. From tomorrow, I need at least 20 or 22 days minimum to discuss about Kubernetes. Try to practice whatever has been discussed. I'll continue tomorrow, guys. Thank you. Sorry for the late today. I took almost half an hour more today just to show you that the private registries, that is also important. We'll continue tomorrow. Thank you.